first became acquainted with who our speaker was when I received a pamphlet in the mail about informational seminar in Kansas, and Maggie and I were kind of talking about going there, and there was a list of speakers on there, which we've had both in American Agri-WOMEN. We've had Karen Budd Fallon speak at our group, and we've had Harriet Hageman into our fly-in, and then last year we had Harriet Hageman at Rocky Mountain College, and it's like, well, who is this Elaine Willman that's here? And we started reading her bio, and then you probably noticed you got a Range magazine in your brochures, and Range is always so good. CJ Hadley is so good at sending us extra copies so that we can read about Range magazine, and I hope if you already get the subscription that you leave your extras at the doctor's office or wherever you do. That's what I do. When you get old, you have all these doctor's appointments, so you just take a Range magazine with you and leave it laying there. But there was an article, then Maggie and I were doing a little research as the program committee, and like, what is this? And so there was an article in the Range magazine called Flush that Elaine had written. And the more we read about it, the more it's like, what is this? What's going on here? And you have her bio in your program, or in your folder, so you probably read some of it to find out that she is of Native American ancestry. And I haven't read her first book, but I downloaded her book, Slumbering Thunder, and I started reading it. And the thing in the foreword that impressed me the most was, I don't consider anybody a hyphenated American. We're all Americans. And I thought, how cool is that? Let's not have African Americans or Euro Americans or whatever it is we are. We are all Americans, and I was so impressed with that sentence that you wrote in there. So I'm not going to take any more of her time, because I think what she's going to speak to you about is something that Maggie and I are kind of taking about, like, this is kind of under the radar. We're not sure that this is really going on. And it has to do with the water compacts in Montana and some of the things that's really controversial. So Elaine has spent years studying some of these issues. And I just welcome her to the floor to give a little bit more of her expertise to us and help us to learn a little bit more about the truth of what's going on. So I introduce to you Elaine Willman.
I'm almost stunned. I speak to groups all over the country and have for years. And I've never walked into an organization's first meeting, first time I've met the group, and listened for a little while, and I think, I want to be a part of this. And so,
oh, thank you.
I am so impressed. I'm so impressed with the education, the engagement, and the intelligence of women leaders in this room, because about all I see on television is those goofy women in the pink hats, and they're such an embarrassment. And here you are, thinking women engaged in your community and agriculture, and of course that's Montana's survival. But I just want to quickly give Karen my membership.
Oh, thank you.
I'm with you. So, very quickly, I can tell you that my professional career was as a planner, community development, and economic development director in small local communities, most all of which were located on Indian reservations. I've lived on the Yakima Reservation for 16 years, and the former Oneida, well, they think it's real, but the former Oneida Reservation in Wisconsin for 8 years, and I'm coming up on 2 years in the middle of the Flathead Reservation. I live in Ronan, Montana. There's a reason why I moved out there, but I have a limited time to share information on two subjects. I want to focus on the most recent water compact that Montana passed in April of 2015. But I want to set a framework. I want to just throw some statistics out to you to help you understand why 2% of America's population is powerfully engaged in acquiring natural resources and lands and jurisdiction in 38 states. Just on a roll. We have 567 federally recognized tribes in 38 states. Washington State has 31. Oregon has 11, Idaho has 11, Montana has 7. But we're talking 567 federally recognized tribes, very separate governments, who have their own constitution that does not necessarily recognize the U.S. Constitution, nor does it provide their enrolled tribal members with the Bill of Rights, civil rights, anything. And these little separate private governments, polka dotting one state after another, are growing like topsy. And they're growing because they have support, perhaps different but very harmonious agendas. They have support from the federal bureaucrats, particularly the last 8 years, but even before, even as far back as Nixon. They have support internally from federal agencies. They have the support of both political parties. This is not a partisan issue. Both political parties are culpable. They have the support of the big NGO environmental greens who want to depopulate everything. And when I say support, this includes funding, so financial support. And then they have the tribal governments. They're not the members, not necessarily the people. I want to make real clear separations. The people members are just as clueless as you and I on most of this stuff. And they desperately need help and they need a voice. And I try to be their voice at every opportunity because they may not and cannot speak for themselves in their own government without some retribution. Yeah, for the most case. I'm speaking broad brush. There's wonderful exceptions. There's some marvelous tribal governments that are good with their families and people. But the really, really good ones are the rare exception. So we have 567 tribes, separate governments, polka dotting the country, under which 29 federal agencies annually fund all the basic needs. Housing, education, health, courts, law enforcement, cultural resources. All the basic needs are funded by you and me, the American taxpayer. Congress has also given them a gaming monopoly in 1988. Huge free money. This is how 1% of the American population is on a huge roll that is replacing our republic form of government with tribal jurisdiction over you and me and our communities. And it is the best kept secret. These are conversations that are made between federal bureaucrats and a few tribal leaders and thousands of Indian lobbyists in Washington, D.C. But until it hits your porch, we're just clueless. And then we're behind the curve because we just don't know. And then if we try to object, well, you're a racist, So I've been called racist. They don't do that to me anymore. I mean, it's really ridiculous. But they can call me any name they want. I just don't care. I will not be muzzled. I just will not. So that's the financial. That is billions of dollars every year going out to all of these tribes, plus their gaming money that they use for what I call the 4 L's. They buy land. They buy legal counsel. They buy legislators from the city up to the state and fed. And they buy lobbyists. And using those 4 L's incrementally every year is getting worse and worse. The poster child is Washington State. You could put probably 3 Washington States in Montana. 31 tribes. They almost control all of Washington's water, natural resources. They own Olympia. They certainly own the governor, Jay Inslee of Washington State. So that's a piece of it. One more piece of it is that the Federal Election Commission, little 3-member advisory committee, in 2000, right before the Bush-Gore election, in 2000, the Federal Election Commission put out an advisory opinion that tribal governments were governments for purposes of their governing their self-governance of the members in the lands, but that they were persons for purposes of participating financially in elections. So these very wealthy tribal government operating budgets can write a check directly from their general treasury into a Republican Party, a Democratic Party, an incumbent, a candidate, They're the only American governments that can financially participate in elections, 567 of them. Imagine the power that has even in Montana with just 7. That is exactly how we got John Tesser. One more thing in the state of Montana, I hope it's unique to Montana, is that in the 2006 election, the ACLU and the Crow tribe, on behalf of states tribes, said, well, these polling precincts are just too far for our natives to vote, to reach, and it's just unfair. And they won. And so multiple polling precincts are on all the reservations in Montana, and the tribes have put them on federal trust land in which your Secretary of State, whose only duty is to enforce a fair election, the Secretary of State of Montana has no enforcement authority on these polling precincts on reservations on federal trust land. That's how Tester skated past Conrad Burns. And that was illegal. The national organization I participate in sued on that. And we saw it coming. There were groups of community folks in Hardin that saw it coming. And I remember the Attorney General for the state of Montana, the attorney for the state of Montana, the federal attorney, was William Mercer, putting out all these ads that, boy, if you see election fraud, you just let us know. Here's the hotline, you just call us. And of course everybody did, and affidavits went into the Secretary of State, and a lawsuit went forward, and it all went away on some technical matter in the community. The Hardin folks couldn't raise the financial resources to pursue it. But when Tester slid through as the 51st Democrat senator in 2006, it changed the Senate, you know, and it brought in Obamacare. And it has brought in all hell for many of us since. And it was done without enforcement authority over numerous polling precincts in Montana. So that's the framework. That's how these things happen. There's a good deal of corruption. Montana has a little over 1,042,000 folks. At least the 2016 census estimates say Montana has 1,042,000 people. 6.8 people per square mile. You know, that's pretty rural. You know, of those million, 6% mark the census form Native American. That doesn't mean they're an enrolled tribal member. About 39 to 40,000 Montana residents are enrolled tribal members in one of the 7 tribes. So we're talking 39,000 of the Montana's population is on a pretty big roll coming after water. And water is life on land or not. And that's why I moved here. I've been working in Green Bay. I need to also qualify that I've attended 2 full years of law school at Ventura College of Law, but I am not an attorney. But I certainly know my constitutions and have worked in local government all my career, and so I have lots of opinions, but I don't give legal advice. But I had been working for Hobart, Wisconsin, which is a suburb of Green Bay, and folks out here in Montana that had my Going to Pieces book contacted me, and they said, we have a problem with the water, you have to come out and talk to us. Or they invited me out once, and they actually invited me out 5 times. From September 14 until, by my 3rd visit, I just fell in love with Montana people. And I just said, I need to get in the middle of this fight. And so I retired from my work in Hobart, and my family agreed to, we say the Beverly Hillbillies moved to the little house on the prairie, you know? And we live out in the middle of the Moise Valley. It's so gorgeous. And I'm in the middle of this fight, you know? And the irony is that I'm one of the few folks in this state, and perhaps in the country, that has done nothing but research and focus on government decisions made under federal Indian policy. And so when I landed here, it was all well and good when I was a visitor and helping, but when I landed here, the opposition, which begins with the governor's office, the opposition said, she's not from Montana, you know? So everybody just discount this woman, she's not from Montana. So I'm having to work through the fact that I'm not from Montana. And I want to say very often, you know, some of you elected officials that are from Montana are hurting your people severely.
It's our new way of screaming racist, and not from Montana.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. So before I get into some of the details, I told Karen that I was gonna bring some reading take-home materials. I wanted to just, and they're all on the back table there, but I wanted to just talk about what they are. This first one is a color table that identifies the water compacts of all of Montana's tribes. Excuse me, I forgot to bring my water up. And you'll see a profound difference between the Salish Kootenai compact, water compact, and all the others. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Thank you. I'm trying to talk as fast as I can because I know I've only got 45 minutes. The yellow flyer is one of the games being played in the last under Obama. And we're hoping we're going to get some really nice reversals, but one of the games being played is using terms that are a couple hundred years old, that are dead. It's dead language being revitalized. For example, you hear an awful lot these days about Aboriginal rights. An awful lot these days about time immemorial. You know, an awful lot about pre-constitutional and pre-European. These are terms that they're just invalid. They're absolutely invalid. But they're being propagandized across the country, and under the previous administration they were putting jurisdictional legs under the term Aboriginal land. Now think about the formation of our country. Time immemorial in the United States starts in September of 1789, when we became the United States with the Constitution. That's when time immemorial starts. Anything before that is wonderful ancestry and maybe prideful history, but it has no legal force and effect. But if you talk to the Indian industry, the lobbyists, the litigators, the radical tribal leaders, oh, that's the gospel. It has no legal force and effect. Aboriginal land, in land ceded to a state, the land ceded to the state upon statehood, as the western states were, you know, included no Aboriginal lands. All the lands were purchased, one way or another, from the Treaty of Guadalupe to agreements between Canada and Great Britain in the west, to the Isaac Stevens territory treaties, the Louisiana Purchase. The Louisiana Purchase was purchased, that's a huge middle of the country. You know, lots of tribes and reservations in there. No Aboriginal land in the purchase, in the Louisiana Purchase. But they'll tell you this. And so when you hear this Aboriginal, you're hearing one of the gang of what I call the Indian industry that is making lots of money from this, over and above what is already rolling out to the tribal governments. So some of those terms are identified. And then I've asked, are your elected officials forsaking you? And the reason I raise that question is because you have constitutions here in the room. There are 3 sovereignties and they're in order in our Constitution. Mm-hmm. The first one is yours and mine, the popular sovereignty. The second one is the states. And the third one is the sovereignty of the federal government. It was the states that created the federal government. Those sovereignties are clearly expressed. 1, 2, 3 in order. First, we the people. Second, our states. And third, the federal government. Well, it sure doesn't feel like that in 2017, does it? It feels completely upside down. There is no reference whatsoever within the 4 corners of the Constitution to tribal governments or tribal sovereignty. The sovereignty that tribes have comes from their federal recognition. But you very rarely hear a tribal leader say, well, we're a federally recognized tribe. They say, we're a sovereign nation. Love to use the word nation. They are dependent wards of the federal government. Congress didn't even create the trust relationship, the courts did in the 1830s, and required the Congress to take care of the dependent wards. So the sovereignty, when a tribe is federally recognized and can receive funds and can have governance, their sovereignty is an extension of the federal sovereignty. It isn't a separate freestanding sovereignty. Another term you hear is inherent sovereignty. Oh, we have inherent sovereignty. You know what? So does the Montana AGRI-WOMEN. So does my family. Any group of human beings that cluster together and have common values has an inherent sovereignty to govern itself. That isn't a legal jurisdictional sovereignty but you'll hear tribes say, oh, we have inherent sovereignty since time immemorial. You know, well, it sounds lovely, but it's not, it has no teeth. It's just bogus. I also wrote a snarky little article, I hope you'll read it, called My American Homeland. And I did this because of the analogy of, we were here first. We want our land back. And I mentioned last night to Melody that I've heard that we were here first on all the reservations so long, I finally said, you know what? This was all land that was, America was formed under the doctrine of discovery, which was conquerors going on all over the place in the early 14, 15, 1600s. So when I hear we were here first, I said, you're very lucky we were here second, because we could be studying you like the dinosaurs. Most conquerors conquered everything. There was nothing left. But our pilgrims and first founders, and they escaped for religious freedom and value, and they worked very, very hard to get along with the natives. And of course we know the Pilgrim story about Thanksgiving. The natives were reciprocal. So I wrote this article about we were here first, we want our land back. I thought, I once owned a beautiful home in Anaheim where I raised my children. That was their homeland, and that was their childhood experiences, their ancestral land. But circumstances changed in my life. I had to sell the home and move up to Washington. And I decided that I wanted my children's homeland back. So I wrote the owner of the property on Stony Brook Drive in Anaheim. I said, that was my children's history and heritage, and we want our land back. And of course he told me to go pound sand. And so that's my snarky article, because it's the same thing. It's like, my grandfather walked these mountains, therefore it's mine. Well, your grandfathers did too. And your grandfather's bones in the cemeteries are as valuable as the bones of American Indians. You know what I mean? We've just gone over the edge with this stuff. So I also, when Trump was elected, I'm going to reveal my bias. I couldn't miss a moment of the TV. I stayed up all night till I knew there's no way Clinton was going to be president. And I was so relieved because I have a 2-year-old great-grandson. And I was so concerned about where this country is going under the previous administration and where it would go even further under a continued Clinton administration. I really had the fear that by the time my great-grandson is 22, there will not be the United States. Because these same forces that are using tribal governments as willing pawns, the One World Order folks, the Agenda 21 folks, the NGO environmental greens, they want to depopulate this country. Agenda 21 shows the North American continent with no United States on it. The United Nations Indigenous Peoples Resolution that Obama signed requires that the United States restore all Aboriginal land back to the Aboriginal tribes. That means the United States is gone. These are the folks that I thought were tin hat people, but this stuff is on the ground. And it's being peppered on the ground through the polka dotting of supporting tribal governments. And it's something that tribal members are not informed about, and the ones that are not happy, but they dare not speak. So I wrote 10 pipe dream resolutions of how to make America great again. On January 1st, I woke up with, this is what President Trump needs to do, so I put that one in there. And then,
did you send that to him?
yes, and I'm happy to report that I participate on a Trump transition team too. And we're sending him the low-hanging fruit that can be easily repealed. This one with the yellow highlights is very useful for people unfamiliar with federal Indian policy. It's just key policies every elected official and citizen within reservations should know. If for example, if a tribal police officer pulls you over for some citation, they may have cause to, and they may have a mutual agreement with the local, county, or state law enforcement. And they may have the authority to issue a ticket to you, but it must be into a state court. You may not be hauled into a tribal court. And it's really important that non-tribal people never walk in the door of a tribal court. There's some consent issues. Now we're going to switch over. The last one has to do with the compact. I'm going to hold off on that. One more thing though before I start on the compact is I want to talk about these two books. The Going to Pieces book was my Thelma and Louise trip. I wish I'd had Laura with me at the time, but I had a lovely gal who was a great videographer, and we did a road trip from Washington State to New York across 17 Indian reservations in the fall of 2004. We would drive one day, we had a room available, and the host group would bring in tribal members, farmers, cattlemen, sheriffs, teachers, bankers, the folks that lived on that reservation. And we'd just turn the camera on and they'd just start talking. And the things that they were talking about in 2004 were so chilling, some of them. And it seemed to get worse as we drove east. By the time and I had promised every one of them, we were going to do a documentary. I promised every one of them we'd get their story told. Well, we couldn't. We had hundreds. We couldn't get it into a documentary. So as a young gal, one of my first jobs was medical transcriptionist because I typed really fast. And so I came back from that trip and I thought, you know, I'm just going to let them tell their own story. And I had all my notes from each thing and just turned the video on and just transcribed verbatim what these folks were saying. And that's in this book. It just relives the trip. And it's a compelling read. It is selling as much right now in 2017 as it has all along, because everything they were worried about is in our face today, and worse, much worse. So this is a good story. Not bedtime reading. Do not read this at night. It's a little upsetting. The Slumbering Thunder book is a compilation of my recent work, my work with Hobart, some successful experiences we've had in standing up and protecting a local town or a county or a private property. It's kind of a manual for how to be courageous enough to say, wait just a minute. Because remember, it's that state sovereignty that is superior. You would never know it here in Montana, but state sovereignty and local sovereignty is superior to tribal sovereignty. And so, but, you know, elected officials don't like to be called names, and they like that money. And so it's a real problem. So these two, I have some for sale here. I brought a few. They're each $20. Oh gosh, this one's going to be free. we'll raffle this one off. Yeah, so they are also available. There's a card back there that looks like this. Has Going to Pieces on one side and Slumbering. They're also available online on any book site, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere. Or you can take this card into any bookstore and ask them to order it for you. They're $25 online, but we're asking $20 here. Another thing I want to mention before I get into the compact is we have a website. I thank Laura Lee for this. Oh, by the way, Miss Laura Lee, who's been my right arm for such a big help, is also the designer of the cover of Slumbering Thunder and was my editor. It's one of the prettiest covers, you know, so I like to give her credit for that. It was wonderful. So the books are back there, these handouts are back there, and now I want to get into the compact. I mentioned the first one that has the chart of all the compacts. Here in Montana, Montana has had some really good U.S. Supreme Court law. And one of them that was good and reasonable and fair is called the Winters Doctrine of 1908, and it created the Federal Reserve water rights. And it was a common sense doctrine that promised Indian tribes and tribal governments that they would always have land, always have water for their people and their lands. That's the Winters Doctrine. I have zero problem with the Winters Doctrine. It's just common sense. All of your compacts, including this most recent Blackfeet, is our Federal Reserve water rights, their Winters Doctrine compacts, where they have water within their reservation boundaries guaranteed to them. They have no off-reservation water. That is not part of the Winters Doctrine. The Salish Kootenai pulled a trick with enormous help from the state. I always say that the state is the bigger defendant, the bigger culprit in this than the tribe. the Salish Kootenai resurrected an old dead treaty, the Hellgate Treaty of 1855. The reason I say it's dead is because all of those Isaac Stevens treaties that were, I think there were about 16 of them, that bundled up tribes on reservations, and they were all intended to be short-term. They were all intended to be for about 25 years, and the provisions in them, they wanted to give 2 generations. President Franklin Pierce, that sent Stevens out to do the treaties, wanted to give American Indians 2 generations to assimilate and become citizens and equal Americans. So they were intended to be about 25 years, and the proof of that is that by 1871, Congress passed the Dawes Act to open up all the reservations and to allot that reservation land individually to a tribal member as a landowner and citizen of his state. When the tribal member received his allotment, it came with a guaranteed water right attached to it. So that landowner had water and land guaranteed, and they had to walk away from their treaty to accept the allotment. And the Salish Kootenai tribe, in 1934, when the Indian Reorganization Act came out, John Collier was the Commissioner of Indian Affairs, and he was an avowed communist and author of several communist books, and he studied Indians in several different areas, including Canada, and he decided, you know, this assimilation isn't working. They need their reservations back, and we need to stop all this. Well, so the Dawes Act had opened up the lands to Indian allottees as landowners. Then followed several Homesteader Acts that opened the lands up to settlers. And then came 1924, when all American Indians were made full citizens. And then 10 years later, John Collier reverses the clock. And that's why we have co-located tribal governments in host counties and towns. And that's why, for a long, long time, it was pretty good live and let live. Gaming changed it all in 1988. Gaming is when it was no longer, let's all be good neighbors. It's like the one that wins the lottery ticket and doesn't have any idea how to manage money or be nice with it, you know. Gaming changed the relationship in communities. Gaming changed friendships of families that had gone to school together. Tribal and Yakima, the Hispanic and the tribal folks, the cowboys and Indians, farmers, all those kids went to school together for decades. They all got along just fine. The Yakima tribe opens up a casino, and it's a way different day. And that tension and difficulty filters out throughout the whole community. I hold gaming accountable for really harming the otherwise marvelous reputation of the noble American Indian in this country. You know, we have a country that is young, 240 some years old. We're still learning by skinning our knees. There are no clean hands, no clean hands. We did some things right, we did some things very wrong. Likewise, Indian tribes did some things right and did some things very wrong. But we're a country that has been coming together and we're still evolving. The problem is, we're on a precipice now because this country is the prized jewel on the planet and it is under assault from international forces and internally as well. So we're at a real important time. That's why I try to get out and talk wherever I can to say, we, people like you in this room, need to inform ourselves and say, wait just a minute, let's look at those first 3 sovereignties, let's look at what's going on here. So, the Salish Kootenai Compact, they resurrected this Treaty of Hellgate of 1855. The only reason that was done was because they wanted that 1855 water date. They wanted that. Now, the Salish Kootenai tribe was the very first Indian Reorganization Act tribe federally recognized by the Congress, by the United States. Very first one to walk away from its treaty and say, we'd rather be an Ira tribe than our treaty. They were the very first ones. And their governing document is the Tribal Constitution, which gives them authority over their enrolled members and their federal trust properties, period. Zero authority over non-tribal taxable lands. Zero authority over non-tribal people. That's their constitution. following their legitimate governing document, they could never have done this compact. But bringing up the old dead Hellgate Treaty and Bullock saying, oh yeah, that's legal, and Tim Fox saying, yeah, that'll work. They're being the only treaty tribe in Montana, that's how it started. And it was actually being developed as early as 1989. The public wasn't aware of anything till about 2011. This was all backdoor stuff between BLM, the Fish and Wildlife, BIA, tribal leaders. It was all packaged up state, lots of state, DNRC. Don't get me started on DNRC. But it was all packaged up and sold. They hired Mercury Marketing, Danny Rayberg's big marketing, for a big propaganda saying, he said, we all have to do this, because if we don't, the tribe will file all their water claims and everybody's going to get tied up and it's just going to be too much money. And the information that went out on that was profound. And like everybody else, mostly across the country, who knows anything about this stuff? That's why my phone rang in Wisconsin. And can you come with, so I came out and read through Senate Bill 262. And Senate Bill 262 has some interesting language in there. It violates the 1st, 5th, 10th, 11th, and 14th Amendment, the compact. 1st, 5th, 10th, 11th, and 14th Amendment, all completely violated in the compact. It violates Section 2. Montana state constitution has something like 39 individual rights of citizens. Section 2 itemizes those individual rights of Montana citizens. It violates most of those. Section 2, for property owners, landowners, takings. And it violates Section 9, which is the environmental resources section of the Montana Constitution. They completely skipped the National Environmental Policy Act. They said, oh, it's a FONSI, it's a finding of no significant impact. Now we're talking in-stream flow water control of 11 counties that border Idaho, on and off the reservation. And Fox and Bullock and Tutpet and Boyce, Vincent, some of those names that I'm learning about, they all said, oh, it's all constitutional, it's all good, this is only paperwork. The compact's just a piece of paper. We don't need this environmental impact study. We can do a FONSI, a finding of no significant impact. And that's a huge violation. Now, can you imagine the environmental impact on agriculture if your folks can't get their water because they're needed for the fish? Or if your folks can no longer claim the water right attached to their land patent because it's been removed? Or if your folks cannot get a lien taken off of their land because their lands were liened to build the Kerr Dam and they were never paid back? That's what the folks, 30,000 people, non-tribal people on the Flathead are experiencing. They have lost the water right attached to their property. They'll never get the lien removed, so there'll always be a cloud on their title. And they are now under the mercy of a tribal government to give them water if they want to. Thank God last year was a good year for the farmers. Some of them even got 3 cuttings over there. This year with this deep dark winter, should spare them again. But we do have to get into court at a point in time and hold the state of Montana as a defendant, even more so than the tribe, and the tribal government and the federal government as a defendant. And we have, the law is all entirely on our side. Entirely on our side. But you've had Montana lawyers as high up as Attorney General Fox. I read the letter he wrote to the legislature in September, assuring them, oh, it's all constitutional, it's all good. It's really upsetting to me. I really respect and admire really good attorneys, and I had a dream of doing that one day myself. But there's nothing I resent more than a political attorney or a dishonest attorney. And this state is loaded with them, really loaded with them. We can't even find a Montana attorney who has the courage to stand up for the landowners or the counties, Lake County, Flathead County, Sanders County. Their operating budgets are just going in the tank. We can't find a Montana attorney that says, my God, this is wrong, let's do something. No, you have to go out of state to find one. And it's really creepy. The other thing, besides the state and federal constitutional errors, legal problems, are a big one. I told you about the Hellgate Treaty as being the foundation of that, of the compact. That's the first big flaw. And the constitutional violations are second and third big flaws, and NEPA is a fourth big flaw. Here's the real beauty. In the first page or two, might be the second paragraph, it's right within the first page or two of Senate Bill 262. You will see a statement that says, the Secretary of Interior has the authority to execute this compact under 43 U.S. 1457. 43 U.S. 1457 is a territorial war power. After the Civil War, when the West was being settled and we had all the cavalry out in the West, there was urgent need for the federal government to have territorial war powers in the territories. That was used for setting up the treaties. It was used for directing cavalry here and there. It was under the Department of War and the territorial war power where the definition of Indian country originally came. And the definition of Indian country was areas in the territory where there are hostile Indians. Roaming, nomadic, it wasn't a geographic area. It's wherever there were hostile Indians in the territory, the cavalry was alerted that's Indian country. Now, in 2017, they're saying Indian country is the full boundary of all these wide open reservations. Well, if you're paying taxes on your fee property, you're not Indian country. But they'll tell you that you are. But anyway, back to this territorial war power. That's valid in territories. But when a state becomes a state, that is not valid. And for decades, the national organization I participate in, we've been researching what is the root origin? Where is the authority coming from? It's not in the Constitution. Where is it coming from? And we discovered it was coming from a territorial war power. We've researched that prolifically, and we've crafted with our legal counsel argument, and we do. The good news is we have a case challenging that that's been submitted on writ to the Supreme Court March 9th. We're praying they take it up. If they don't take that case, there's 2 or 3 more coming up behind it. But when a state becomes statehood, the federal government may not implement a territorial power over a state. May not do that. That is the authority for taking land out of a state's tax base and putting it into federal trust for a tribe. If we challenge that and succeed with getting that territorial war power, that's going to put the reins on losing property tax bases in one county after another. So there's some progress that we're making. The problem Montana has is the governor consented to using the Hellgate Treaty. The governor consented to this territorial power. The governor consented to the tribal government having authority over you and me if you live on the Flathead Reservation and need water. The governor consented all those things away. And that's why that keeps me up at nights, and that's why I'm working with groups to find the time. Now, the compact's not supposed to be implemented until it's ratified by Congress. It was adopted in 2015, April. It's still sitting in the Secretary of Interior's office because Senator Tester bloated it up, added more billions, and it's in trouble. It has not been delivered to Congress for review or ratification. But what has Bullock done? He has codified the compact into Montana code. He has executed a separate agreement with the Salish Kootenai tribe to implement the compact, and it is under implementation now. And the word coming back is, well, it's Montana code now, we have to follow the law. Well, they funded the comprehensive implementation technical team, so we have to do what they say. And it's not even been delivered to Congress or ratified. And so the farmers are just holding their breath, doing their best. I've had examples in my neighbors out there in the Moise Valley. One of my neighbors is a big potato farmer, and and he planted a couple hundred acres of peas. And in fact, it was the week that we moved there in July of 2015, horrible heat wave, and they were unloading our moving truck, and the tribe cut the peas were just at peak, and the tribe cut the farmer's water off, scorched the whole 200 acres, you know? And when the acreage was gone, they turned the water back on, you know? And then we've had cattlemen that have big herds of cattle and that had their stock water cut off. So they relocate the herd to some area with water, and they'll turn the water back on. Those were the kinds of games being played in 2015. They've settled down a little bit now because the water and the weather is like God's looking over us over there, you know. The farmers had a good year last year. They should have a good year this year. But across the state, so those are the big pieces, those are my objections to the water company. You don't take water rights off of a private property. You know, you don't make it impossible for money you paid to keep a lien on your property for Kerr Dam after you've given it to the tribe. You don't do that to your landowners, you know, but that's what's happening over there. Now, why is this important for statewide? Because if this compact ever passes, if we don't defeat it in court, and I believe we will, but I'm not sure when, and we need lots of help, if this compact is ratified by Congress, the phone's going to ring from all the other Montana tribes to the governor. You got to treat us the same. We want our in-stream flows and off-reservation. And see, these waters for the Salish Kootenai are not owned by the Salish Kootenai. These waters in the 11 counties to control the in-stream flows above and below the reservation, those are held in trust by the United States on behalf of the tribe. So when all these other tribes see success with the Salish Kootenai, they'll ring the phone and say, you have to treat us the same. And then the federal government has acquired the waters of Montana. Now here's another thing that plays in. And I sent this, even when I was still in Wisconsin, I sent this case to Governor Bullock and to Attorney General Fox and to everybody I could think of. Because in 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court had a case, and this is important for you folks. It's a case, it came out in June of 2013, and it's a case called Tarrant versus Herman. T-A-R-R-A-N-T, 2 R's, versus Herman, H-E-R-R-M-A-N-N. Tarrant v. Herman. And if you pick up my my little red, white, and blue business card back there and email me, I'll send you the case. Tarrant versus Herman in June of 2013, 9 justices, 9-0 completely unanimous ruling written by Kagan, one of the liberal justices. And the ruling was, states, I think this is almost a direct quote, states have the absolute right and authority over all navigable waters and the soils beneath them for all lands deeded to the state upon statehood. States own the navigable waters and the soils beneath them for all lands deeded to that state upon statehood. That was the Tarrant versus Herman was a 4-state compact between Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas, where they did a compact, and because it was multi-state, it had to be approved by Congress to share water as needed among the 4 states. Well, then Arkansas tells Oklahoma, we need water, and Oklahoma says, well, we don't have any right now. Arkansas sues Oklahoma, and that 4-state compact went up to the Supreme Court, and Oklahoma won. States have the absolute authority over all navigable waters and the soil beneath them, land ceded to their state. Now, that was June of 2013. Right behind it comes waters of the United States. The EPA isn't going to have anything to do with that ruling. Comes water. So if the states own all the navigable waters, what are the federal navigable waters? You know? They come out with WOTUS, and the whole administration had gone rogue, especially EPA, as you know, and BLM, you know the stories. And so the former administration, and even your governors in Washington, Montana, Oregon, most places, are also ignoring the state Supreme Court ruling. They're not standing up to protect their state natural resources, their state water, and their citizens. This state is not doing that. So one more thing, and then I'll take some questions. I I don't speak agriculture. That's not my area of expertise. I watch my daughter, she loves that stuff. But I did do some research on the economic status of agriculture in Montana. And there was a good article from 2016 that said the 8 years prior to 2014 were pretty reasonably good years for the farmers and the various commodities. But from 2014 since, there's a slide going on. And of course, I was really thrilled when you talked about cool, because I was upset that they took cool away. The cattle industry is really in trouble because of that, I think. So this report is saying that the economy, the ag economy, and they listed it as the first key industry in Montana, is in serious slippage from 2014 to the current time. So I learned that. So then I found Governor Bullock's vision for 2019, his budgeting vision for 2019. It's about a 27-page document. And he's got some goals in there, which include fiscal responsibility, infrastructure investment, job creation, business incentives, education, tax fairness, caring for Montana families and children. So I word searched his whole vision document and whole goals for how he wants to spend Montana's money in 2019. You will not find the word agriculture in that report, or farm, or water. It is not there. It's just not there. The support for agriculture at the state level sucks. I mean, that's not a nice professional term, but it's really frightening. When you hear all these folks say, oh, we want to bring high tech, well, yes, we do. But if you forget who you are and what really, pays for this, if you forget your home roots and your financial home roots, and you're on a known slide, that's why women like you and even the American Ag, because this is going across the country, the waters that are being confiscated by the federal government on using tribes as ponds or the endangered species, whatever works, has wiped out San Joaquin Valley. That was 20% of America's food. The real end game is crop production, crop and meat production, and depopulating the area for preservation. So now I'll take your question.
Well, I know that Attorney General Fox was one of the first to put the state against the waters of the U.S. regulation, and he filed that lawsuit. His statement in the article that I read, actually a couple articles, was all waters in the state are the states, they're not the federal government's, therefore, Lotus wouldn't float. So, I mean, he stated that numerous times.
Yes,
So
I've seen it too. You'll hear people say the state waters belong to the states. Well, what about the state waters in 11 counties that border Idaho? Those were just handed over. So there's some forked tongue, so to speak. There's some mixed messages going on there. But Montana did jump into that WOTUS case that's going forward. And of course, Pruitt and the Trump team are taking a hard look at it and reviewing it now. I do expect it to go away, because I think it was truly a knee-jerk reaction to the Supreme Court's unanimous ruling about who owns the waters. Yes?
a comment on that is, if it's ruled by the Supreme Court.
Could you speak just a little bit louder?
The comments I heard on that with Attorney General Fox in the room was that it's not bad that that Supreme Court case isn't going away, because if it's just like dissolved by President Trump's administration, it can be brought up again. Whereas if it's ruled that the federal government does not have jurisdictions over these waters by the Supreme Court, that will stand lasting. And so the fact that they didn't just dissolve that court, just didn't dismiss the case, is actually in our favor if we win.
Are you, I want to be sure I understand you, are you speaking of the case in which Montana is a participant challenging WOTUS?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually good, because everybody thought when Trump came in, the EPA would just erase the waters of the U.S. and then those cases would go away. But what they're saying is, they believe their case is strong enough, they will win that the states own the water. And once that's decided in the Supreme Court decision, that we won't have to fight that battle again. Whereas
Yeah.
if Trump just kind of waves his
Right.
wand and writes something and it's dissolved, the next president that comes in and their administration could.
I think
reverse
that's correct. The problem is, where were they with the 2013 ruling? I mean, that should nobody, no state governors anywhere in the country took up the Supreme Court's ruling to protect the state waters under Tarrant in 2013. So now they're fighting back, now they're going back to the very court that said you own it in the first place, saying make WOTUS go away, and that is the last word. But if the last word is ignored by federal agencies and state decision makers, you know, is it the last word? That's been the problem with the previous administration. It has thumbed its nose at court rulings and thumbed its nose at states' rights, everything. It's just gone totally rogue. And that's where we're reining it in now. But these things that were made troublesome didn't just pop up overnight. Remember, I mean, you know, they've been building incrementally. They're not just going to go away overnight either. But our job is to grow the voice and say, hurry up and get them done as fast as you can, and bring some balance,
So then, I'm not familiar with that, but you're saying that it already is the Supreme Court ruling of 2013?
Yes.
That states that?
Yes.
And that was the Tarrant versus Herman, or what?
Tarrant versus Herman, yeah.
So there already is a Supreme Court ruling
Right.
that says it?
And then WOTUS, they put WOTUS out to contradict it and implemented it all over the place. And now we've got states saying, wait a minute, we want to get rid of WOTUS. Well, you have to wonder where those states were in 2013, but I'm glad they're where they are now, that they are challenging WOTUS again. You know, it is confusing.
Well, and we need to start at the local, not just local, but at the governor's office. Because they just did a major, we signed this Salish Kootenai Water Compact just this week. And it's like, how can you do that? That is against the law, what you just did. And everybody goes, oh, isn't it great? The Indians got the water. Well, I guess they can call me a racist, but those Indians don't own that water. My parents have had water rights going back to my great-grandfather in 1801.
Right.
They don't own that water.
Yeah. No, they don't. They don't own any Aboriginal land either.
Get riled up over there.
Yeah.
So what went on last week? I'm sorry, what was it last
The
week?
governor made a big deal, pictures, the whole 9 yards, about signing over
Was that the Blackfeet? That might have been the Blackfeet.
That was the
That was the
Blackfeet,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, that is one of the Federal Reserve water rights. They don't have off-reservation water rights there.
But now the Salish Kootenai tribe is doing exactly the
Yes.
same thing.
Only expanding it to.
Yeah, they're expanding.
Yeah.
I have a little bit different take on this, and maybe it's because I'm a little pessimistic about the government, but what I see happening here is that they're taking these people and they're saying, come on, we'll be your friend. It's like a cobra is in the basket and they don't see the cobra.
Exactly, yeah.
But the government, once this happens, the
Yeah.
Indians are a reserve.
Yes.
That means the government
Yeah.
has reserved them.
Yeah.
And the government owns
Owns
them. And once the government gets the water in their hands,
Exactly.
guess who owns the water?
Yeah.
And I've been telling Butch's Indian cousins this, and they're like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whenever we go up there, if we go to Blackfoot or Browning,
Yeah.
I say, you're just a reserve, you not, and it's like they're dumbfounded, but I want them to start thinking so they'll quit doing this.
But
Yeah.
there are, I will have to say, there are lots of Indians that understand
Absolutely.
exactly what she's
Yeah.
saying and don't like it.
And they're private
But they are
landowners.
terrified
Absolutely.
to say anything in
Exactly.
their own tribal council.
They are, because
don't,
they
yeah.
get, we went to a tribal meeting, and I don't mean to drag this out, where we've got a friend that is, and they're productive, they're hardworking, and they've got
Yeah.
cattle. Well, they want to put buffalo up the Badger 2 medicine, and he said, well, I got cattle up there, and the chairman said, well, you're illegal. And, you know, and he shut right up, but
And that
this,
was a native too.
and he's a native, yeah.
Yeah.
But he said, I've got cattle up there on the Badger 2 medicine, and old chairman said, well, you're illegal. You know, I mean, they just shut him down, you know, I don't want you, I want you with your hat in your hand coming to me.
Yeah.
I don't want you productive, and I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but that's my opinion.
You know, my husband is Shoshone. I told some of the folks, am I running out of time?
just gonna show you 10 minutes.
Oh, okay.
And I'll be quiet.
My husband is a Shoshone, and he's a direct descendant of Sacagawea's adopted son, Basil. And he and I have this well, our families, we just have a growing up affection and interest in our own ancestry and whatnot. But my husband was with me, and I got to tell you, he's completely opposite from me. He never speaks up. I just wander the earth, and he's always home. But I took him with me to an early meeting with the Oneida tribal leaders in Wisconsin when we were there, and he attended, and they were going, get to know the Oneida tribe. So there's all this big schmoozy show. And then they had Q&A where you could answer a question and get ask a question and get no answer. But my husband stood up, which was shock number one. And then he says, I've always wondered about something. He said, you say that the white man really hurt you, and that the white man is the reason for all your problems, and that you don't trust the white man. He says, then you go out and spend top market commercial dollar for a piece of property, and you give it to the white man. You know what I mean? That's what federal trust is. I mean, and exactly what you're saying is very correct. They're reserved. The federal government owns the tribal reservation lands. And they can, anytime they want to, say, okay, it's all over now. Thank you for sharing. We'll keep the land. You're on your own. You know? Congress has that authority, and the executive branch has strong authority in Indian law as well. It is a puzzle. And there's a lot of this. Well, Justice Clarence Thomas calls it schizophrenic. He said that in 2 different cases where they're dependent wards with their sovereign nations. They hate the white man, but they give the government back the land. You know, there's a lot of this confusion in there. But the worst part, or the problematic part for me, is the incremental expansion, replacing local jurisdiction and authority with tribal government authority over non-members. That's where we need to rise up. We really do. Laura Lee, you had something.
Yes, I just wanted to remind you, because there's another piece of this.
Oh, yes.
And that's Turkey.
Okay.
And our illegal aliens.
Let me go back, and you had a question too?
I do, go ahead, I'll ask it. Go ahead.
I need to go back to 1904, when the West was settled, and you need to understand, and you well know what the country looks like, and you all know where most of the, Grand Coulee Dam, Hoover Dam, we know where the big dams are. In 1904, the Secretary of Interior then had a policy that as the West is settling, the new states are forming, all water, dam, and electric power facilities were locating in the West were to be located on or near Indian reservations. So that's why Kerr Dam, Coulee Dam, Hoover Dam, all your big dams, even little dams, are on and near Indian reservations. That was to keep the federal footprint and control over water and power in the West. 1904. That was wonderful in 1904. Now we fast forward up to 2012. Obama got Congress to pass the Hearth Act, H-E-A-R-T-H, the Hearth Act of 2012. And the reasoning was, private sector business in America is just not running onto reservations and helping them develop economically. Well, many have and did and tried and got burned, with the sovereign immunity. If you build something and you submit your invoice and you don't get paid, you're out of luck. So Obama said, the wealthy Middle Eastern countries can come in and do economic development on Indian reservations. And so within the Hearth Act is the authority of a tribal government to bring Middle Eastern economic development onto federal trust lands. Now remember, there's no state or county eyes or authority, but they can bring Middle Eastern economic development onto federal trust lands for long-term lease for up to 75 years, no prior BIA authority, no BIA oversight. Now, let's go back to the dams. In 2010, Congress gave the Indian Energy Policy Act, throwing billions of dollars out to tribes to go, that our national power grid is good economic development for tribes. That's precipitated the takeover of Kerr Dam and other dams across the country. So now we have Indian tribes taking over, with no experience of course, these power plants and dams. And they can also bring the Middle Eastern economic development. That's polka dotting. We have 340 reservations in the lower 48. That's setting up what I think is a real national security risk. And that also, in my own opinion, I imagine the strongest tribal leader, the strongest Sharia leader, who do you think is going to take over?
Yeah.
And what do you think are going to happen to our American Indians?
Oh my God.
It's just God awful.
No wonder you don't sleep at night.
No, I don't. Well, I sleep like a baby, I really do, but I get up every morning. This is what I do. I'm not the kind of woman, that likes to crochet or knit or play bridge. I'm not into getting up and self-amusing all day. I have I'm done raising kids and grandkids, and this is what I have one country. I wasn't fortunate like those of you that have multi-generations on the same land. My dad was a traveling insurance man. I went to 7 schools in the 2nd grade all around the Northwest.
Wow.
And so I was telling Melody, I don't have a hometown or home state, but I have this country. And I love American history. And I love American Indians. And I just think we're the most marvelous country in the world. And I just think the folks that are coming after us are evil to the bone. And too many of them are in decision-making chairs within our country. So that just wakes me up, and I figure, you can't, you know how old ladies get away with more. I'll say anything I want. I might not have done this at 30, but by God at 70, just try to shut me up. Well, let's open it up. Do we have time can we go to Q&A? Because I really love Q&A.
So really, this fits in with exactly what's going on even in sanctuary cities and all this.
Yeah.
It's just a resistance to, it's just a saying, we're gonna resist whatever the president brings out or whatever change in policy, and we're not gonna do it. It's like a rebellious child. So it's like, even though the law is on your side, it's like you have to, sounds like, you're saying we're gonna have to make these agencies do it or make it, you know what I mean? Even if it's ruled and it's all on the up and up, it's all legal, verified, but they're just kind of saying, no.
Yeah.
It's like, what
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that's on,
Yeah.
it's reverberating on every level.
Yeah.
What do we do in the cities, what do we do, and that's that kind of that theme of just resistance, like on our college campus,
Well,
we don't wanna, we're not gonna, we
you're
don't wanna.
right.
We don't even want a dialogue about it, we're just gonna resist.
It's been incentivized by the bureaucracy of the federal government going rogue.
Yeah.
They haven't followed the law. Why should anybody else?
Exactly, at the borders.
Yeah.
Or anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
We've talked about the Indian tribes up in the north of Montana, but I can tell you that the Crow tribe is now working at getting the Yellowstone waterways, tributaries, and the main Yellowstone River under their control.
Yeah.
I mean, this is snowballing, and it's snowballing fast.
Very fast. And thank you for mentioning that, because you just reminded me of something else, the way things are working. The Army Corps of Engineers, we have major river watersheds, the Missouri River, the Mississippi, the Columbia. And the Army Corps of Engineers has drawn an arbitrary boundary around these major river watersheds for every little trickle and tributary that feeds into that. And then they set up a federal board to manage and develop the policies for these river watersheds. And so, for example, the Missouri River watershed has 9 states involved. And so there's a representative from each of the states on the Federal Management Board. It has 27 tribes involved. So there's 27 tribes that sit on the Federal Management Board with 9 states on that management board. That policy has shifted from primary agriculture, industry, and economic development. That has shifted to endangered species, cultural resources, habitat, environment, all this stuff. And down at the bottom of the food chain, there might be water for irrigators.
Might.
Out of these major watersheds. Now, look at Columbia River. We're part of that. That's only 4 states. Montana, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. 4 states on their management board. 53 tribes. Who do you think is controlling the Columbia River? And that's why this stuff is moving fast, way fast. But most folks that need the water, use the water to the extent ag does, you're out in the fields all day. You're working the lands all day. You're just making a living. What kind of time do you have to research and engage in this stuff? And what did your kids learn? My daughter's in her 50s. I think it was her generation that got a little bit of government and history and the Constitution in her K-12 experience. But most kids are not getting any of this. They're getting no American history, no Constitution, no government. And so we've got, every time I go to groups, it's usually folks about my age. And that's the other thing that impresses me about your group is I see people in here my daughter's age, you know, it's like, yay, that's
What
great.
is sad too is we've got so many young people. I'll tell you what happened in Madison, Wisconsin. I was just back with my granddaughter and it was Easter and they're building all these condominiums and I said, and my little granddaughter said, oh look, nobody's working today. I'd make them work so those would hurry up and get done so we didn't have all the noise. Not meaning a meanness or anything.
Yeah.
She just didn't like the noise and all that. And this young woman from Nebraska was sitting there and she said, oh, Thea, you think just like a capitalism. Make them work even on a holiday.
Oh.
And I thought, you don't even know what capitalism is, sweetheart.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
and they're Bernie Sanders lovers.
yeah.
I'm a first generation American. My mother was born in Reykjavik, Iceland. She taught me to love this country.
Yeah,
My cousins would love to live here because they live under socialism.
yeah,
My cousin that I finally got him to see, she calls their hospitals the slaughterhouse.
really?
Wouldn't you love to be in a socialistic country?
Yeah.
I know socialism, they live there. They'd love to live here and these silly kids don't know what they're
Yeah.
wishing for. Oh,
Well, even the healthcare system in Canada, which isn't as bad as where you're at, but we have lots of Canadian friends. They come here
Yes.
for health.
Yes, exactly,
They do.
exactly.
What does that tell you?
and my relatives all go to Spain because it's so horrible there. I mean, you know, it's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Here's what I would ask of you. And I want to keep these questions and this conversation going for so long till you have to leave. But here's what I would ask of you. I've only been out in Montana a couple of years. I am not connected. I am not politically connected unless somebody just hears of me and invites me to come out and talk. So I would ask of you, if there are state farm associations,
Yeah.
state cattle associations, if there are associations that would be willing to listen to me, please let them give me a call, please let them know, because there was so much really unfair and untrue propaganda, and very big farm associations supported that compact, and I thought, what are you doing to your members? And I would like to give them at least another point of view. So I'd appreciate it if you have those kinds of contacts. Have them give me a call.
The straw growers of Montana and the Wyoming straw growers, and there's people in this room that can
Yeah,
make that.
that would be good, as long as it's not snowing, although Laura Lee is just excellent on black ice. As long as we can get there. I don't charge a fee. I do ask for travel expenses, you know. And I don't charge a fee because I think this is just too important. So to the extent that you can help me get the word out to the industry that is affected the most by this, agriculture is #1 target. I'd appreciate it.
And I wanted to say on this, that how do we continue the conversation with you? I know there's social media, there's
Yeah.
for the education, and I know that you're fast tracking to get the message out. So kind of what can we do for you, and how can we keep our conversation and our network?
Well, what I just mentioned is one way, and also you can Google YouTube and my name, and there's an awful lot of workshops that I've done and put on that go deeper into some of these issues. But I will say that this is the first time I've given a talk that has focused primarily on the compact. But I need to, so in terms of it's very important to understand, have a fundamental understanding of where a tribal government might have authority over you, which is never, or where, you know, to protect your interests. So because you'll hear things that are, you know, it's the classic lips are moving. You'll hear things that are not true, but we always want to be nice, and we always want to cooperate. So you might watch a few video presentations. I would really encourage you, just because it's a good read and it's a good background. My goal in writing this book was to tell the actual story, the experience of these people, which was it was a life-changing trip for me, and it was a pretty exciting trip, to tell this story. And as the reader's reading it, they're getting accidentally educated on federal Indian policy. Because I've just written a book here's a book about federal, who's going to buy that, you know? But this is real life, real people, 2 crazy women that made this trip. And it's just packed with information. This is the 2nd edition of Going to Pieces, and it has an index. So it's as good a reference tool as the Slumbering Thunder, which also has an index. The first edition didn't. Yeah, Laura?
Well, and the other thing is, if you visit our website, the
Oh.
cases that she's referred to,
Naughty,
and
naughty.
we have a section for videos, under media. A lot of her speaking engagements and others are posted on the website. But almost all of the information that she shared today, you could read in different documents on our
Yeah.
website.
Thank you.
And this book got a little bit of water on it, so you have another prize.
Well, you stand right here, and we're gonna thank you, let's give her a.